I got to say, Cenk, that just crosses every line of just basic human decency to me. Rob Reiner was murdered last night by his troubled, unhinged son. And to make political capital, and what angers me about it is there was all the outrage from Trump supporters, rightly, when the left mocked Charlie Kirk after he was murdered. And I thought we'd reached a kind of consensus that this, whatever side of the divide you're on, this is just unacceptable. That when people get murdered, you just show basic respect.
This clip is 4 months old, but I am bringing it back because it tells you everything you need to know about who Donald Trump actually is when the cameras catch him being himself. Rob Reiner, beloved director, American patriot, was murdered by his own son in a devastating family tragedy. And before the body was even cold, the President of the United States went on Truth Social and made it about himself. Not thoughts and prayers, not basic human decency, a political attack implying Rob Reiner brought it on himself for criticizing Trump. Now here is why this matters right now. American soldiers are dying in Iran, families are getting that knock on the door, and the man sending them there is the same man who looked at a grieving family and made their tragedy about his own greatness. I'm Justin, this is Justin Speaks. Subscribe, hit that like button, and stay locked in because the full breakdown is at the end.
And it's just happened as we came on air. And I just thought we've got to start with this because when you're the most powerful man in the world, listen, everyone knows I've known Trump a long time. But this is one of those times when many times he's been like this when big public figures have died. I remember it with John McCain. I remember it with Colin Powell. And each time I just wince at the lack of basic decency. What is your reaction to that?
Well, you saw that I came on here and I was brokenhearted when Charlie Kirk was killed. And I condemned the people celebrating it because, my God, if you're part of the peace movement, you're on the left, et cetera. We're supposed to be for nonviolence more than anybody else. So, and that was disappointing at that time. And then Donald Trump, among others, said it was the most outrageous thing they'd ever seen. For him to do it now to Rob Reiner, I mean, and for what? For what? I mean, did this guy advocate for some heinous thing? Not at all. And here's what I want people to understand about Rob Reiner. So he was obviously an enormous figure in Hollywood. Some of the movies that we all love, like Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally, etc., right? But on top of that, here's something that no one could argue with. Rob Reiner was a true American patriot. He loved this country. Now, whether you agreed with him or disagreed with him on any issue, he's a guy who put his heart into this country and always tried to make it better. You could see patriots like that, whether they're on the right or the left, who deeply care about their fellow man. And Rob Reiner was definitely one of those people. He was the best of us. And to die in such a tragic way, and then to have the President of the United States rub it in and somehow make it about himself. Look, I could get angry at Donald Trump. We've all been angry at Donald Trump. But if you're on the right, more than anything else, you should just be deeply disappointed. Is this what you wanted? Is this the ha-ha, you're dead kind of mentality that you wanted? It sounded like after Charlie died that you really, really didn't want that you thought it was a terrible thing to do.
Well,
so
that's the
excuses.
Point. Yeah, look, that's the point, Gillian, that I would make, is it's going to be very interesting to me what people on the conservative right in America say by way of their reaction to what Donald Trump has said here. Because if there's any support for this from MAGA, from his supporters, his friends, from anyone, then it flies completely in the face of that whole debate after Charlie Kirk, when so many on the left behaved disgustingly. I remember calling it out at the time. And then here, the idea that he was murdered because of something to do with his views of Donald Trump, which is complete nonsense. It's. I'm not just disappointed. I'm angry with it.
I completely agree with you and Cenk here. I will say that when I woke up and learned about this, it was on Brandon Tatum's Instagram, and he actually showed the clip of you talking to Rob Reiner. So my hope is that any reasonable person on the right or the left finds political violence disgusting, any support of it disgusting, and I'm with both you and Cenk. There's zero pushback over here. I'm extremely disappointed in the way Trump.
I mean, it's not
handled
even,
this.
you know, there's not even a suggestion it's political violence in this case, right? We don't know why the son did this.
Well,
other than,
either way, if Trump was trying to imply that it was because of Trump derangement syndrome,
Right.
any violence of any kind
I don't think
is
he was.
reprehensible. I'm not quite sure exactly what he was trying to imply, but I'm disappointed by his response. I have yet to see anybody on the right endorse that statement or celebrate the death of Rob Reiner. I certainly hope we don't, and I promise you that I would absolutely condemn anybody who does that.
Right. I mean,
I'm
let me
with you
bring
guys.
Wajah in. I want to play a clip. This is another clip from the interview I did with him. I spoke to him for 45 minutes, literally in mid-September. It was a great interview, and I was very struck actually by the more mollifying tone that he took throughout this interview about Trump, who he has been very critical of in the past. There's no question. He's ranted away about Trump, like many in Hollywood have done. But in that interview, he struck a very different tone. And here's him talking about Trump and the fact the left kept calling him Hitler. Senator Ted Cruz has come out and said that people should stop using the Nazi rhetoric. And I feel very strongly about this. I think that you can absolutely go after Donald Trump in an aggressive way, but calling him Hitler or calling his supporters Nazis, I think crosses every acceptable line.
It doesn't get you where you want to be. I don't really know very many things that I agree with him on, but I also feel that if you go name calling like that it's not going to get you what you want. You have to rally people around the things that you agree with that are in disagreement with Donald Trump. And to me, the one area that, again, we both agree on is the freedom of speech and in the Constitution, First Amendment.
You know, there's an irony there with Jahat about the name calling, because I don't know what Donald Trump thinks he'll achieve with this rant about Rob Reiner, as his body is still warm from this brutal murder. But whatever he thinks it will achieve, it will only, I think, anger and disappoint a lot of Americans, if not all Americans. And I just don't understand why he would use his gigantic platform so soon after someone is murdered to do this.
The harsh truth is this is who Donald Trump is. This is who he has always been. He's been cruel. He's been vulgar. He's lacked empathy. I mean, you just saw this right now. I'm glad you brought it up because I read it right before I came on your show. You know, Rob Reiner and his wife, it seems that they were brutally and tragically murdered by their son, who apparently had mental health issues and drug problems. He was a beloved director. And you're seeing Donald Trump right now, who is the president of the United States, folks. He's the commander in chief. He's the representative of our country. And you just hope any president, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. What they say is this is a terrible tragedy, thoughts and prayers. Simple as that. But we've seen Donald Trump just even recently with Erica Kirk. I was on your show and we all praised. It was a consensus amongst the panel that when she forgave the alleged shooter, Tyler Robinson, we all said that was very brave and a beautiful thing to do at the Arizona rally. What did Donald Trump do right after she said it? He goes, I don't forgive. I'm not as forgiving. Like, why would you say that? And then also after he survived the assassination attempt, if you remember at the RNC, Pierce, you know, he had that patch on his ear. They gave him a script. He was supposed to be decent, kind, you know, meditative for the first 20 minutes. And then he mocked and ridiculed Paul Pelosi, who survived an assassination attempt by David DePape. So this is who he is. And Pierce, if I may say, he's been like this for 10 years. I've been saying it. Cenk's been saying it. Roland's been saying it. For everyone waking up today, where you been? This is who he is.
Well, where I've been, I've always called it out when he's done it after people die. I think there's a particularly distasteful aspect, and I'll bring Emily in here. You know, when people have just been murdered, whether it's Charlie Kirk, whether it's Rob Reiner, it doesn't matter to me what their politics are. When they've been brutally murdered, the only decent, civilized, human thing to do is to just be respectful or do nothing. You know, if your genuine feeling is what he's just ranted, well, don't say it.
Right. I feel like as the president of the United States, he does not with all due respect, have any obligation to need to tweet about Rob Reiner. I feel like he has, other things going on, and that's reasonable. If I were in Trump's inner circle, would I had told him to post this? Probably not. I'd suggest strongly for him to just not say anything at all. The first I'm ever hearing of Rob Reiner is that he has Trump Derangement Syndrome, and that still doesn't change any of my empathy towards him. I didn't know who he was. I'm hearing now he was talented. In fact, one of the first impressions I've had of him was Donald Trump's tweet. But I really think we're doing a disservice by drawing parallels from this to political violence, even bringing up Charlie Kirk's murder. I get why you brought it up, Pierce, because you're saying, well, if you don't like how the left celebrated his death, don't celebrate this. But nobody's celebrating Rob Reiner's death. I hope, as Jillian said,
well, it sounds like Donald Trump is getting. Yeah, but look, it does sound like he's getting pretty close to it. I mean, when he says that, he got killed reportedly due to the anger he caused others with his mind-crippling disease, Trump Derangement Syndrome. There is zero evidence for any of that. He got killed by his deeply disturbed son after what the TMZ and New York Post and others are reporting was a terrible family argument. The son, Nick, who's now 32, was a screenwriter who'd battled and talked openly made a film about drug addiction, homelessness, and so on. But apparently, used whatever kind of implement to slit the throats of his parents.
Yeah.
I just think.
I hear you. I'm not justifying it.
So
I don't
I'm not saying that. I don't think there's
any
any political motivation for this attack whatsoever. But Donald Trump has made it political by inferring very clearly that this happened because Rob Reiner attacked him, and that to me is where
I disagree. I disagree, Pierce. I'll tell you what I think his intention was, and I will also preface by saying he did not get the message across. I feel like his intention was, hey, everybody, look, although this man hated me, and although he had Trump Derangement Syndrome, he ended it, putting us together with may they rest in peace, whatever. I feel like what his intention was even though I disagree with him, the guy died, and I'm sorry for him. He did that in possibly the worst way.
Stop it.
And I just don't feel like this is really shocking to anybody here. I feel like we've all been following Trump over the last 10 years. And as Wajahat said, that's his style. You like it or not, that's who he is. This tweet was wrong, but it's not, necessarily so shocking for all of us to see. And also, it shouldn't be blown out of proportion.
I actually did find it quite shocking. And I have known Trump a long time. I am a friend of Trump's, good, bad, and ugly. And I got to say, Roland, there's no defense for this.
There's no defense. I don't know what the hell I just heard. Let's be clear. He has no morals, no values, no decency, no ethics, no principles. This is who he is. This is not a shock at all. He's a narcissist. He is someone who makes everything about him. And so this is who this man is. This is who he was, not in the last 10 years, Piers, but going back to when he was descending down those escalators. Going before that, the whole thing with Obama and the birther. This is who this man is.
Well, he's always been a trash talker.
So I'm not
Roland, hang on.
Not trash talker.
Hang on a second. Look, he's always been a trash talker. Right, he's a New York real estate guy. He's a trash talker, and I would say, I know, I'm going to come to that. In relation to general trash talk, my God, the left talk trash about him, right? As I said in that clip, so all the Hitler stuff and Nazi stuff, all that, it's a two-way street. The trash talking. This is a particular thing. Which angered me. It angered me when I saw his reaction to Colin Powell dying, to John McCain dying. I just think there's just got to be on all sides when public figures like this die, whether they're great politicians or they're great movie people, whatever it is, there just has to be a basic decency. If people get killed or murdered or whatever it is, or die after great lives and careers, just either be decent or don't say anything.
Here's the deal. This all sides is nonsense. First, listen, the regular average person who's out there on social media, that's one thing. But it's called being a statesman for a reason. I'm literally sitting here, I grabbed my book, Master of the Senate, of LBJ, and it was amazing. Cairo talks about how LBJ, how when he was president, how he spoke and moved differently publicly than he did when he was majority leader of the Senate, because he saw the presidency and the respect for the institution. This person has none. This is no shock. There's a reason I don't even call him president, because he does not rise to the occasion in that way. This is who he is. He will degrade people. He will say these things. I am not shocked by it because he is despicable in this way.
Well,
and there's no defense. There's no, well, I think he meant, no. He meant exactly what he wrote.
Okay, look, I want to move on to...
Let's talk about what this moment actually reveals, because it is not just about one tweet. It is about a pattern of behavior that has been consistent for a decade, and that becomes more dangerous the more power the person exhibiting it holds. Wajhat Ali said it best in that segment, and it needs to be the starting point. Where have you been? If you woke up that morning genuinely shocked that Donald Trump mocked a murdered man on social media, that shock is the problem. Not because the behavior is acceptable, but because the behavior is not new. John McCain died and Trump mocked him. Colin Powell died and Trump attacked him. Paul Pelosi was violently attacked in his own home and Trump mocked him at a rally to laughter and applause. Gold Star families, parents who buried children who died in military service, have been attacked, dismissed, and belittled by this man. And now we are in the middle of a real war with real soldiers, and real families waiting by their phones. The man who cannot find basic decency for a murdered Hollywood director is the same man deciding which targets get struck, which escalation options get approved, and which families get that knock on the door. That connection is not abstract. It is the most important thing to understand about the moment we are living in. The Trump Derangement Syndrome line is the one that deserves the most scrutiny because it was not an accident. It was a deliberate political move dressed up as a condolence. Trump did not say Rob Reiner had Trump Derangement Syndrome by accident. He said it to make a specific argument, that people who criticize him are mentally ill, that their opposition to him is a disease, not a position, that their deaths are therefore connected to their own pathology rather than to tragedy. Think about what that framework does in the current political moment. We have people, serious people, credentialed people, military people, questioning this Iran war, questioning the legal basis, questioning the exit plan, questioning whether American soldiers should be dying for a conflict that was started without congressional authorization. And the president who launched that war has spent years building a rhetorical framework where anyone who questions him is deranged, where criticism is a mental illness, where dissent is disloyalty. That is not the language of a democracy. That is the language of a man who cannot tolerate accountability and has built an entire political identity around escaping it. Emily Austin's defense is the one that needs to be called out directly, because it is the defense that always gets deployed and it always fails the same way. She suggested Trump's intention was probably good, even if the execution was bad. She said he probably meant to show grace towards someone who opposed him. He just expressed it poorly. No, Roland Martin was right. He meant exactly what he wrote. There is no charitable interpretation of implying that a man was murdered because he criticized you. There is no generous reading of invoking Trump Derangement Syndrome while a family is still processing that their loved one is dead. The intention was exactly what it looked like. To make Rob Reiner's death about Donald Trump's greatness, to turn a tragedy into a talking point, to use a murdered man as an opportunity to remind his audience that opposing him has consequences. That is who he is, not who he sometimes appears to be, not who he is when the script is in front of him, who he actually is when nobody edits him before he posts. The hypocrisy dimension is the one that the original creator correctly identified, and it deserves its full weight. After Charlie Kirk was murdered, the right was furious, legitimately furious, at individuals on the left who mocked his death on social media. And they were right to be furious. Mocking a murdered person regardless of their politics is indefensible. This channel said it, Piers said it, Cenk said it, Wajhat said it. There was a consensus across the divide that this behavior crosses every acceptable line. And then Donald Trump, the president who led the outrage over Kirk, did the same thing to Rob Reiner. Not an anonymous social media account, not a random commentator. The President of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, the man with the biggest platform on earth, and the silence from the people who were loudest after Charlie Kirk is the most revealing thing in this entire story. Because it proves that the outrage was never about the principle. It was about the politics. When the left mocked their person, it was a moral outrage. When their person mocked someone from the left, it was just Trump being Trump. That is not a principle. That is tribalism. And tribalism at the level of the American presidency is not just embarrassing. It is dangerous. Roland Martin made the most important point of the entire segment, and it needs to land with full force. He talked about what it means to be a statesman. He referenced LBJ and how presidents historically understood that the office demanded a different standard of conduct, publicly, rhetorically, morally, than any private person. That the weight of the presidency required a different kind of bearing. Because the president does not just represent a party or a movement. The president represents every American, including the ones who voted against him, including the ones who criticize him, including the families of soldiers who are dying right now in a war he started without asking Congress for permission. Those families deserve a commander-in-chief who understands that their loss is not about him, that their grief is not a political opportunity, that their sacrifice demands more than a Truth Social post about Trump Derangement Syndrome. Donald Trump has demonstrated over and over and over again that he is incapable of that standard. Not occasionally, not on bad days. Consistently, predictably, repeatedly. John McCain, Colin Powell, Paul Pelosi, Gold Star families, Rob Reiner. The list is long and it keeps growing. Here is why this 4-month-old clip is the most relevant thing you can watch right now. We are at war. American soldiers are in harm's way in Iran. Families across this country are living with the fear that they might get that knock on the door. And the man who sent those soldiers, without a vote, without a plan, without an exit strategy, is the same man who looked at a murdered Hollywood director and used his death to talk about himself. If he has no basic decency for Rob Reiner, he has none for the soldier who dies in a war he launched because Netanyahu convinced him it would be quick and easy. That is not a political point. That is a character assessment based on a decade of documented evidence. Wajhat was right. This is who he has always been. The question is not whether it is shocking. The question is what we do with that knowledge. This channel exists to make sure that knowledge does not get buried. To make sure the pattern stays visible. To make sure that every time someone tries to separate the tweet from the war, the post from the policy, the personality from the consequences, we connect them back together. Because they are the same thing. The man who tweets without decency governs without decency. The man who makes tragedy about himself makes war about himself. And the people paying the price for that are not sitting in the Oval Office. They are sitting in communities across this country waiting to find out if their son or daughter is coming home. Like this video. Share it with someone who still thinks the tweets are separate from the stakes. Subscribe to Justin Speaks, and come back because we are going to keep connecting these dots for as long as they need connecting. See you in the next one.